It's the most wonderful time of the year, and it's time to rank all of the Doctor Who festive specials from worst to best. Allons-y! The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. Well, this surely can't come as much of a surprise. Little positive can be said about 2011's Christmas special because, well, little can honestly be recounted. It's just that forgettable. Running away from his own problems of not being able to see his friends on account of being officially dead, the 11th Doctor resorts to cheering up the Arwell family's Christmas after their father is lost during World War II. Now, the tropes taken from C.S. Lewis should make for a magical and inspiring tale, but a combination of unfortunately weak child acting, wasted cameos, and bare-bones plot do this story a disservice. With little going on, the main attraction of the episode is, ironically, its ending, with a heartfelt reunion between the Doctor, Amy, and Rory, which wraps up Series 6 in a satisfying epilogue, for better or worse. But when the best thing about the episode is the fact that it ends, you know you've got an especially weak story. The Return of Dr Mysterio. The 2016 Christmas special marked the return of Doctor Who after a year-long hiatus, and is surprisingly entertaining to watch, despite being quite forgettable in comparison to literally everything else on this list. Blending sci-fi with the superhero genre, it is a very cheesy and on-the-nose episode, and perhaps its biggest problem is that the Doctor takes a significant backseat to the superhero shenanigans, causing the story to feel like something out of CW's Arrowverse, rather than the BBC's hit science fiction staple. Peter Capaldi brings his A-game, and Matt Lucas is a welcome addition as Nardole, whilst Justin Chatwin is serviceable as Grant. However, Harmony Shoal proved to be something of an underwhelming villain, and ultimately 2016's only episode of Doctor Who ends up being entirely skippable without any ramifications. The Time of the Doctor. Many may be shocked to see this one so low on my list, but I've had gripes with Matt Smith's regeneration story for many years. Yes, it's an incredibly epic finale for the 11th Doctor, bringing all his various enemies together for a massive showdown, but this special has the unenviable job of wrapping 3 years worth of storylines together in a bow, and I think it buckles under the responsibility of this. With too much going on, half the episode is wasted on ridiculous comedy hijinks involving Clara's Christmas dinner and sexual tension with Tasha Lem, before finally picking up speed once the plot sets down on Trenzalore. But it's too little, too late. What should have been an epic battle turns into a half-assed montage that just feels rushed and cobbled together with sticky tape. The Time of the Doctor does have a solid ending and regeneration, but the positives are not enough to save this mess. Luckily, everything this story should have been was done to perfection 4 years later in Peter Capaldi's penultimate story, The Doctor Falls. Matt Smith's swan song, therefore, is just disappointing. Resolution. Jodie Whittaker's time in the TARDIS saw the abandonment of Christmas specials in favour of adventures at New Year. So it was that 2019's Festive Special brought the 13th Doctor face to face with the Daleks for the first time. Well, one Dalek anyway. The Dalek in question is the best thing about this story. Taking cues from Robert Shearman's incredible 2005 epic, this Dalek is a monster of a thing. Incredibly entertaining, it manipulates, it dominates, and it exterminates everything before it, making for a far better conclusion to Series 11 than the Battle of Ranskorath Kolos. The secondary plotline has always been a bit puzzling though. Series 11 established the absence of Ryan's dad and the ramifications of this on his life, and it's good to see the story come to a head, especially with a meaningful cafe scene midway through, but it's just an odd story to couple with a Dalek bloodbath. The two elements clash tonally and leave this story feeling very unfocused. Resolution is solid overall and will be especially remembered for its action set piece for many years to come. Revolution of the Daleks. New Year's 2021 and the Daleks are back again, this time with Captain Jack Harkness in tow. With the Doctor imprisoned halfway across the universe, can her companions stop the Daleks? Revolution is a lot more focused than its Dalek predecessor, weaving its plot threads together much more coherently and generally having a more enjoyable pace as well. This story renewed the idea of a Dalek civil war, something that I've been calling out for quite some time at that point. With Jack's inclusion, much of my Doctor Who wish list was checked off. The episode isn't perfect though. The opening scene of assassination is very ridiculous, as is Leo's decision to clone the Dalek mutant in the first place, which he does bear in mind before he's even possessed. Jack is underutilised as well. I mean, he never even dies once. However, he and Yaz do have a very powerful scene where they discuss the ramifications of travelling with the Doctor, so that's a positive element. This special also sees the departures of Ryan and Graham, which is a really moving moment and wraps up Series 12 very nicely. So Revolution of the Daleks is a bit clunky, but does a lot more right than it does wrong. A Christmas Carol. The 11th Doctor has 1 hour to save a crashing spaceship and a miser's soul, but what lurks in the fog? I've always been in the minority that have never really thought much to this widely beloved Christmas special, but having revisited it recently, I've gained a new appreciation for it, with its crest to redeem the cold and bitter Kazran Sardak, as well as its heartfelt commentary about time running out and the preciousness of memories. A typical timey-wimey adventure, A Christmas Carol explores the joy of life and love, expertly blending the comedic silliness of the following Series 6 with the delicacy and wonder of the preceding Series 5. Whilst the story does a commendable job fleshing out its central characters with laser focus, many more minor ones, unfortunately, such as Amy and Rory, get lost in the mix. That said, I am starting to understand why A Christmas Carol is well regarded by the fandom. However, my appreciation of it has just come too little too late to place it any higher on this list. The End of Time. The 10th Doctor faces the end of his life as the Master unleashes the greatest terror of all. When most people think about the end of time, it's very clearly Part 2 that holds any nostalgia. The 10th Doctor's iconic regeneration, the 4 knocks, the Time Lord face-off, and the discussion about the Doctor's morality make for incredible moments. But the end of time is very much a tale of two halves, and while Part 2 is very strong indeed, Part 1, not so much. Sure, Part 1 has some golden moments like the cafe heart-to-heart and the spellbinding cliffhanger, but then you've got the Silver Cloak sequence and the fantastical prison sorcery, which just feels very much out of place considering the serious nature of the rest of the story. The strengths of Part 2 hold the End of Time back from dropping any further down this list, but Part 1 holds it back from rising any higher. Whatever my nitpicks though, it's a story for the ages and a powerful send-off for the 10th Doctor and RTD1. The Next Doctor. The Next Doctor gets a lot of flack for being one of the weaker Tennant specials, for the gargantuan Cyber King stomping across Victorian London, and for abandoning the intriguing amnesiac Doctor mystery partway through its runtime. But despite whatever flaws the Next Doctor might have, with its general underutilisation of the Cybermen or one-dimensional villainess Miss Hartigan, it more than makes up for with its heart and emotional resonance. David Morrissey makes for a very charismatic alternate Doctor, so much so that it'd be cool if Big Finish one day did an Unbound series where he was legitimately an incarnation. Get on that, guys, it's a good idea. Toying with the idea of the incumbent Doctor meeting a future incarnation is interesting, and we'll finally see realisation in the giggle, with 14 meeting 15. As it is, the banter between Tennant and Morrissey is a highlight of the episode, and Jackson Lake's story is quite endearing. A star-studded cast, an eerie graveyard attack, and a beautifully Christmassy setting all help it remain memorable, but there's just something lacking about the second half that keeps the Next Doctor from being one of the all-time greats. Still, it ends on a beautiful high and is worth a revisitation from time to time. Last Christmas. It's Doctor Who does Inception as the 12th Doctor and Clara face their last Christmas. Trapped on an Arctic base under attack from dream crabs, Santa Claus appears to be their only hope for survival. Now, having rewatched Last Christmas before writing this, I was concerned for a moment that I would be dropping it down a few numbers. It takes a while to get into gear, with the setup of events dragging and the first half being plagued with insufferable humour from the elves. Luckily, Clara's dream with Danny Pink marks the spot where Last Christmas finds its groove. And the best thing about the story is that it acts as a perfect epilogue to Series 8, resolving the bittersweet departure between Clara and the Doctor and drawing a line under Danny's story arc. The Inception story thematic is well crafted and engaging, making for a concisely written episode. The inclusion of Santa Claus is bizarre, given the absurdity of his character in this, but the episode justifies its inclusion, and Nick Frost's dry sarcasm is a welcome addition. Last Christmas is guilty of backpedaling over Clara's departure, however, as it was meant to be her final episode. As a result, the final scene feels a bit tacked on, undercutting the scene paralleling the 11th Doctor's ending in Time of the Doctor with the Christmas cracker. Despite some nitpicks, Last Christmas is an enjoyable and underrated episode. Eve of the Daleks. On New Year's Eve, a time loop and a squad of executioner Daleks means the Doctor's countdown to midnight will be the strangest and deadliest she has ever known. Now, I'm a sucker for time loop stories. Edge of Tomorrow, Source Code, Happy Death Day, they're my jam, so Eve of the Daleks instantly appeals to me. That, and honestly, it's really entertaining. The Daleks are presented as an unnerving and continuous threat, like they're straight out of a slasher film. The character dynamics are also great, with Sarah and Nick's budding romance plot actually coming across as heartfelt. Throw in Team TARDIS's manic attempts to save them as they keep respawning in different locations, and you've got a very engaging set piece crammed full of urgency and tension. Eve of the Daleks is by far and away my favourite of the New Year's specials, and is one of my favourite stories from the entirety of the 13th Doctor's era. That said, the rest of this list's entries are far more iconic, and unfortunately overshadow this underrated gem. Joy to the World. When Joy opens a secret doorway to the Time Hotel, she discovers danger, dinosaurs, and the Doctor. But a deadly plan is unfolding across the Earth, just in time for Christmas. This year's Christmas special was a pleasant surprise, as it took an unexpected direction, dispensing with the advertised Time Hotel and even guest star Nicola Coughlan for a good chunk of the runtime, in order to be a quiet and down-to-earth look at what exactly happens when the Doctor takes the long way round. The first 2/3 of this episode are incredibly well done, with the 15th Doctor's year-long stay at the Sandringham Hotel being a particular highlight. Shout out to Steph Diwali as Anita Ben, who is the MVP of the episode. The Doctor's rant about Joy backfiring and turning into a justifiable criticism about the UK government's handling of the pandemic was also a gobsmackingly powerful moment. The final third of the episode just doesn't feel as strong, as it dilutes itself into an action set piece, which clashes with the slower, more personal tone of the story. Joy's sacrifice also doesn't really feel earned, nor as powerful as others before her, for example Astrid in Voyage of the Damned. Overall though, it ranks lower than last year's special, mainly because the Church on Ruby Road was a bit more consistent across the board. If not for the weaker final third, this may have beaten it. Still, it's very well done, and I look forward to 2025 season because of it. The Husbands of Riversong. When a crashed spaceship calls upon the Doctor for help, he finds himself recruited into Riversong's squad and hurled into a chase across the galaxy. Coming off the back of a divisive Hellbent, 2015's Christmas special has some heavy lifting to do to temper the raised ire of part of the fandom. What probably didn't help it much at the time, but benefits it in retrospect, is how unashamedly goofy it is. Much of the first half is dedicated to a running gag of mistaken identity between River and the Doctor, as well as an over-the-top performance by Greg Davies as Hydroflax. This does tonally clash with the second half, which is far more dramatic, but time has been kinder to the balance between them. Both sides of the fandom are serviced to with this episode. Not only do the comic relief shenanigans appeal to a broader family viewing experience, but the die-hard fans are treated to River's story coming full circle with a famous trip to Beryllium, closing the narrative arc that started in 2008 with a legitimately beautiful and heartfelt scene that left not a dry eye in the audience. The Husbands of Riversong is a gorgeous episode, closing a particular chapter of Doctor Who in style. The Church on Ruby Road. Last year's Christmas special just misses off from the top 5, but it's still worthy of recognition alongside them. While not everything set up in the story has aged well thanks to Empire of Death, 2023's special still sets up an intriguing mystery and introduces the fantastic Ruby Sunday, whilst giving Ncuti Gatwa his first full episode to flex his dynamic acting chops. Indeed, the instant dynamic between Millie and Ncuti is breathtaking, and is one of the main reasons I like this episode so much. Character chemistry can make up for a lot when the plot is lacking. That's not to say the plot of this episode is lacking at all, but the way the main characters bounce off each other makes for such a great viewing experience. The Church on Ruby Road is a feel-good episode. While not as thematically Christmassy as many of its peers, it's full of heart and optimism. It kicks off a brand new Doctor's era with flair and passion, and despite the mixed payoff that was to come, it helped reignite the flame of excitement for the future of Doctor Who, which was beginning to wane at the time. The Christmas Invasion. The original Christmas special holds a dear place in my heart. Whilst not the most riveting story to grace the festive season, it set the foundations of everything that was to come. The regenerated 10th Doctor is out of action throughout most of the runtime, giving Rose and the rest of the supporting cast the opportunity to shine. As Earth is dominated by the Sycorax, Harriet Jones proves what an absolute queen she is.
You can tell the President, and please use these exact words. He's not my boss, and he's certainly not turning this into a war.
When all hope seems lost, the Doctor returns, and sheer euphoria ensues, leading to an iconic and magically Christmassy ending, heralding the dawn of a new era of the show. It's not the strongest festive special by any means, but its iconography and reputation earns it a spot in the top 5. It is a bona fide, classic Doctor Who adventure. The Snowman. When a fairy tale becomes a nightmare, and a chilling menace threatens the Earth, Clara Oswald calls on the Doctor for help. Now there's something utterly spellbinding by Jenna Coleman's first outing as Clara. The beautiful, snowy setting of Victorian London, the sinister snowman, the TARDIS on top of a cloud, its beautiful new interior, all of these things combine into a formula that leaves the Snowman as a fantastically engaging episode. Matt and Jenna's chemistry is a delight, as is the one-word Q&A scene. What this story creates is so good that it's a shame that the Victorian version of Clara wasn't pursued any further. This episode is filled with amazing reveals, perfect humour, and re-energises a middling season, giving new direction for the remainder of Matt Smith's tenure. In my opinion, The Snowman is the very best of what Series 7 has to offer. The Runaway Bride. Killer Santas, exploding baubles, and an alien spaceship shaped like a giant star. The Doctor finds himself with a new companion, and Christmas is anything but a silent night. The second ever Christmas special saw the creation of one of the greatest double acts Doctor Who has ever seen, the Dr. Donna. Yes, Catherine Tate brings an iconically loud-mouthed yet emotionally vulnerable Donna Noble to our screens in this highly memorable story. Yeah, the Rachnos isn't the greatest villain ever. Sarah Parish can barely move in all of those prosthetics. But despite this, the thrills remain, with an exciting taxi chase, a trip to the creation of the Earth, and an adventure underneath the Thames that accumulates in a moment so important that one of Series 4's crown jewels in Turn Left is birthed from the repercussions. The Runaway Bride is quintessential modern Doctor Who, and is one of the most vital episodes in the last 20 years. Fitting that a Christmas special can hold that distinction, really. Twice Upon a Time. In the final chapter of the 12th Doctor's life, he must face his past to decide his future, discovering hope in his darkest moment. Most people say that the 12th Doctor should have regenerated in the Doctor Falls, and I do concur with that sentiment. However, I really love Twice Upon a Time, not least because it's a multi-Doctor story, but because it's a reflective piece about endings and letting go. It's nice to have an episode where there's no evil plan, which allows the characters to have quiet, introspective moments. Peter Capaldi, David Bradley, Pearl Mackie and Mark Gatiss are all wonderful, and Murray Gold pulls out all the stops with his then final musical contribution, blessing us with essentially a best-of playlist. Many people overlook this story, as the general belief seems to be that it's an unwarranted epilogue to an already sublime story. But I think it's a heartfelt closing chapter with some final scenes that truly resonate the beauty of life and kindness. It is a touching and blissful episode, and I adore it unapologetically. Voyage of the Damned. When disaster hits the Titanic, the 10th Doctor uncovers a threat to the whole human race. Battling alongside aliens, saboteurs, robot angels, and a new friend called Astrid, can he stop the Christmas inferno? Voyage of the Damned is the ultimate Christmas special. It's visually festive, has a stunningly action-packed plot, Australia's pop princess in a guest role, and has music that got a BAFTA nomination in 2008. This episode marks the start of an almost flawless run for the show, which carries on until the end of the following series, and boy does it set the tone for the amazing adventures to come. Adhering to the tried and tested formula of Base Under Siege, Voyage of the Damned flies by at a breakneck pace, mercilessly axing off characters and demonstrating the consequences of the Doctor's travels. With tragedy, humour, an iconic rendition of the opening theme, and moments of magic, this episode truly has it all and sits proudly at the number 1 position on this list. I'd be very surprised if it's ever dethroned. So that was my rankings of the festive specials of Doctor Who. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment sections below, as well as your lists. Thank you everybody so much for stopping by and checking out this video. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and share it around to help out the channel. And until the next time, see you all later.